Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dark Winds. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So in this episode, we get a little bit more context, understanding of everything between Joe and Guy. Obviously, that kind of came about because of stuff between Anna and his son, JJ, Joe Jr. So what we know is that, well, first and foremost, I didn't talk about this last episode. I meant to, but I completely forgot to talk about it. Obviously, the actor who plays Joe is Zach, is it McLaren? I best know him as, I want to say, what's his character name? Matthias. It's been a while, but Longmire's like, I think, my first introduction to him. So he's not, I think he's also an executive producer or producer on the show, but regardless, Guy was with someone during a, God, what did they call it? It was him, Lester, and another guy, and that guy had a vision about, he's like, yeah, you want to stay away from the mining, the dig site today, you and your other guys who worked there, and they did, but they didn't tell anyone else. It's just, they only were looking out for themselves, and Joe's son, JJ was there, and he died in the explosion, whatever went wrong. And we also got context because Lester ended up telling Joe. Joe ended up confronting Guy, and things got nasty. And he even blamed. He's like, "It's like, right, Anna. She knows what to do with that." He's like, "No, that she shouldn't have that because it was JJ's like Letterman jacket, I think, from school or sports or whatever, right?" And so I guess the proper ritual is when someone dies, you bury not only their body, but maybe like some of their maybe some or maybe all of their personal belongings. Because we see them doing the same thing to Anna's stuff. Obviously, present day, and Guy was mad because that's all they have of Anna. They don't have her actual body, I think is what he might have been talking about. But I think it's just like, right, you bury, I guess, some of the things that, probably not everything, but just the things that are that person cherish, some of the special things, or maybe certain things. I don't know how the whole aspect of it works, because Joe's supposed to bury the jacket because his wife Emma told him to get rid of it, but he still can't. He's still holding on to it. I don't know whether it's because it represents, like, once you that person will be at peace, and he's probably, I take it as like you hold on to someone's stuff like that because it keeps their spirit from fully moving on. And maybe there's a part of him that doesn't want his son's spirit to move on. It's like, I want you to stick with me. I want you to cling to me. I want to always feel like you are still somewhere in this world, even if I can't see you. I thought like your presence is here. Maybe that's what that's about. Maybe there's something I'm missing in why he's keeping the jacket. But regardless, back in the past, he told Guy, like, oh, she shouldn't have that. He's like, we'll give it back to you. He's like, no, she knows what to do with it. And he blames both Guy and her for his son's death. And I'm assuming it's because there's that flashback later on where JJ, he was going to go to college, but he decided not to. And his mom was like, no, you're going to go to college. He's like, I made a little money. It's not enough to even buy cigarettes. And she's like, you smoke? And he's like, yeah, you kind of sold yourself out there, son. But I'm assuming that's what that's supposed to be. Maybe that's why Joe said what he said, because maybe JJ decided to stay behind because of Anna. He didn't want to break up with her. He wanted to kind of start a life where, like, him being in love with her made that decision. And it's like he decided to stick around and take a job. Like, he probably took that job at that mining place to have more money for their future. And it's like, if it wasn't for you, Joe was just lashing out, which obviously led to a tussle between him and Guy. And then it's like, okay. And then Guy picks up an axe, and Joe kept being like, don't do this, and shoots him in the leg. And it's like, okay. So it's understandable why things are super bad between them. Because it was almost like, because he insinuated like something else was on Joe. I didn't know if he was trying to make it seem like JJ's death was on Joe last episode. But maybe he was just kind of like, right, this is kind of what you brought upon my family all the 3 years ago. Maybe that's what he's kind of insinuating. I don't know. I'm curious how Guy and Lester, because Lester Guy knows that Lester's the only other person that knew. So once again, it's like what's said in there is meant to stay in there. And I mean, to be fair, that conversation was had outside, so it was outside the whole thing. So I guess that would kind of be the loophole for that, but I don't know what Guy and Lester's relationship is like now because of that. Because he could only assume Lester's the only one that knew. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see where any scenes between them going forward now having that knowledge. But obviously they're continuing their investigations. Bernadette didn't want to go back to check on Sally because she didn't want to go back to that house because she is a lot more superstitious and believes in all of this more so than Jim does. Which, speaking of Jim, also I kept being like, I felt like I recognized that actor. I didn't realize it, but I looked through his filmography. He was in Roswell, New Mexico, the show. He played one of Alex's other brothers, Flint, the one who chose their dad's side, the one who's also dead. I didn't reckon. I was like, what? I was wondering why I kept feeling like I recognized him, but I think that's what I recognize him from. Tangents aside, Jim's not the superstitious person, and I wonder is that because he's been away from this for so long and it's kind of dulled that part of himself. Of like, yeah, those are just stories and stuff like that. But for Joe, it's like, yeah, those stories and beliefs that have kept us alive, our people alive for so long. It's like, yeah, like, because even being like, oh, do you keep a medicine bag? He's like, that's a personal question. But I also love that Joe, he was like, yeah, now why don't you get that, take it to this particular lab. But, I didn't know we had that. It's like, no, they have one at the FBI. But it's like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, you are an FBI agent. And he was just kind of like, I've never been accused of that before. And he's just kind of like, nah, I know who you are. And I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And he's like, how'd you know? He's like, I didn't know until you confirmed it, kid. He's like, shit. I was like, yo. He's like, don't worry, you didn't do anything to give it away. What really gave it away, gave him any inkling, is that last episode when he brought up the totem, his boss looked at him a certain way, gave him that look, and Joe's like, yeah, my dad used to give me that same look anytime I stepped out of line. So that made him go like, okay, there's some connection here between the both of you. So I was like, damn, just that was enough. Because he had just talked to Anna's grandmother, and she said, like, right, some people here aren't what they seem. And he's like, yeah, I know. And then, like, he's like, no, he's like, understood it. And Jim's like, what did she say to you? He's like, something I already know. I was like, that's why I was like, yo, like, how do you interpret? Because that's a double-fold question at that time. A statement. Because, well, we know that some people here on the reservation aren't who they claim to be because some of them are behind this murder, as well as the robbery. So that's one angle to it, but also Jim not being who he claimed to be. And I was like, wait, is that supposed to be? It was like, at the time I was like, does that mean Joe knows? So I wasn't sure, but that scene was really good. Like immediately afterwards, him calling Jim out like that. So there was also that scene that, yeah, once again, FBI agent or not, who you being Native American is always going to come first and foremost, because he goes and talks to the guy. He's like, yeah, I'm an FBI agent. He's like, oh, you don't look like an FBI agent. He had to pull out his badge. It's like, do I look like one now? And it's like, yeah, I want you to check this water, I just want to make sure I don't get poisoned, because he's saying this like from his family's place or something. He's like, oh, don't the Navajo like tap water? And then just like Jim's looking at him like, yeah, we like tap water, but we get our water from a well because the uranium or whatever that gets tapped for scientists like you in your labs basically pollute our water. So, and the guy I was like, yeah, you should feel like an asshole, dude. And he also makes sure not to tell his boss that Joe found him out. So he's just getting the files. And jumping around a little bit later on, well, for one, Joe's suspicions yet again are confirmed, where he's like, he wasn't sure, he was hoping to find something, but it's like, yeah, the test of the water was inconclusive, but that was just Jim messing with him. I love that. Jim kind of getting him back a little bit. It's like, no, your instincts are right. You did find a helicopter. So now they know the helicopter from the robbery is in fact in the water. And so Jim says that he's not going to tell his boss. He's not, the FBI aren't going to flood the reservation. And I'm like, and Joe's like, huh? And it kind of goes back to that sentiment. I guess no one is quite what they seem, or something like that. What Anna's grandmother had told him. So I thought that was interestingly how that kind of comes full circle in that regard. Because it was cute, his Jim's boss did basically say like, right, who make sure you choose your tribe. And I'm curious because we haven't really gotten 100% confirmation. I have my inklings of why he might have decided, like, no, I'm not going to tell my boss. I'm going to help you investigate this, get justice. Because, one, I think it's that his boss is more so concerned about, like, right, we'll have, like, I'm going to go to DC and I'm going to bring you with me. Yeah, you can finally get out of here, yada, yada, yada. It shows that he only cares about, right, let's solve this, let's make a name for ourselves and make a position out of it, whereas Joe is legitimately trying to look into these murders and that he cares a lot more than anyone else. And maybe that's enough for Jim to be like, nah, I'm going to stick with Joe. Not unless it's the lone con. We'll have to wait and see. Basically get him off your back by making him seem like you're 100% on his side, that your loyalty is to his, because he also knows your secret, so you kind of have to, like, maybe in his mind it's like, oh, I gotta play into this, or maybe he's being sincere. I'm like 75% sure he's being sincere, 25% being like he's kind of trying to play Joe, but we'll see in the long run. We also got confirmation on what happened to Anna. Apparently, she got scared to death. Because I didn't even notice that streak of white in her hair. Like, now it's pretty obvious when they pointed it out. I was like, oh, the entirety of last episode, I never noticed that. So it's like, right, she basically had a heart attack. And it's like, because apparently she got scared to death. What did she see that scared her? I wonder, does it have anything to do with that dark spirit that lady that just keeps popping up all over the place, being creepy as hell? Because that's why, Bernadette didn't want to go back to check on Sally, which Joe actually did, and was trying to convince her that she should stay somewhere else because the father, the baby father situation being what it is, it's like, right, you're better off somewhere else. But for her, it's like, this is her life. This is kind of all she knows, and she doesn't. I think she feels like she can't really leave here. The guy that was in the shed last episode, I think that's one of the main guys behind the robbery and stuff. I was curious about that, the one that was hanging out in the shed, that if Jim had opened it up, he would have blasted. I think that is him. I don't know if he's necessarily the baby's dad, or is that just some other situation? Like, why would he be in that particular shed if not, like, he is, like, the baby's dad, I think. So that would be complicated. That I think all that is going to end up, like, connecting. But staying on the Sally stuff, she does take Joe up on his offer. In fact, she's actually staying in him and Emma's son's room. And she's like, right, do you feel weird for me being here? And he's like, no. And we actually find out what Emma was trying to protect Sally from last episode. Or like, right, you don't want to stay here. This guy's going to make it so that you can never have children again. And it's like, that's why why her and Joe never had any children other than JJ, is because what happened to her, and she didn't ask for it. The procedure was just done to her because the doctors are, I don't know if it's a government thing, or I don't think it's like just the doctors doing it on their own. I think the government orders them to do that. I think once again, I feel like I brought this up last episode from a historical standpoint. I feel like I remember that, like, that's not just something the show made up. It's like, that's a thing. Making it so that, like, Native women can't, once again, I think it's a very, like, fucked up, like, their justification, I think, is a very fucked up version of population control, like, specifically in the Native American community. I think is what that was about. Once again, that's just my understanding from the vague memory of, like, history classes I took back in high school. I think some of that might have gotten covered, or maybe I've just picked that up from somewhere else. But maybe, like, having someone else there, you know, filling that space might help heal some of the wounds that they both have with the whole JJ thing, especially because she's pregnant, going to have a baby. Maybe it's like, right, having a little more life in that house rather than just, or at least for now, rather than just kind of being them by themselves and just kind of carrying kind of like JJ's death with him. I mean, granted, it's only been 3 years, so. Then there was that guy, because I think that guy who was looking for the painting at Lester's, I think that's the guy who was the cop when it came to the robbery. He came in looking for a very specific painting. It's like you were supposed to hold it, but Lester sold it to a Mormon family. They're on the road. That guy ends up calling up, which I believe the guy he calls up is the guy that was in the shed last episode, or that little, the one that Jim almost ran into. I think that's that guy and he chases down that family. And I don't think things are going to work out for that family. I mean, because later on when Bernadette finds the car, it's completely empty. Two, they saw his face. Like, would he really let that entire family live? He probably has them, like, they're probably dead, which is heartbreaking. Because if they weren't, like, why he would have let them go on their way, but it's like, right, you don't want cops involved, and they're eyewitnesses now. Like, once again, that's always a scary thing of, like, if someone's doing something and they don't have their face covered, you should be scared, because it means they're not going to let you live, because you're an eyewitness. You'll know what they look like, so I can only assume he killed that family. Bernadette found the car, called it in, and Joe and her examined it. And it's like, right, there's no leaking fluids. The engine seems fine, especially when they crank the car. So no license and registrations and stuff like that. So no way to know who the car's registered to until they run the license plate number. But I did like that Joe did apologize to Bernadette. Like, right, I kind of jumped on your case about, like, because she didn't want to go back to Sally's house. And he was like, oh, you're not going to do your job? Because she's saying, like, right, that lady, the dark spirit got inside my head. Last episode, she even tried reaching for my hair. But when Joe went to check the place out, check on Sally, he did find, like, hair in a little bottle. And so it's like, right, you were right. Your instincts are there. So I'm kind of sorry for jumping down your throat about it. So it's like, yeah, he knows she was right about that. So but what is interesting and what's revealed is that the reason why they want that cactus painting in particular is because I guess they hid, maybe they made copies, or maybe they bought a very similar painting and they put all the money in it. That way you'd always know very specific. I don't know whether they made copies of the painting or what, but the paintings is where the money that they stole is behind. And it turns out the father is involved in all of this. The one claiming, like, the victim, the guy claiming to be his grandson, which maybe he is, but he could just be someone that's playing that role just so he can, just so that he can keep an eye on the investigation or, like, find out who knows what. Because it is kind of messed up. If you're a part of this, you're part of the reason why Anna's dead, and you're there with checking on Anna's, I think, grandmother, because he was walking with Anna's mom earlier in the episode when Jim and Joe ended up running into him. Because it's interesting, because he said, like, oh yeah, I was paying respect for someone, like, I wasn't named Jack Wilson, guy died of cancer. And you see that Joe is looking, I think, through obituaries and sees Jack's name. And so it makes you go, like, right. That the reason why he had that name ready is because maybe it was just a name he just happened to see in the obituaries recently, and it served the purpose of what he needed. It makes a basic question, is he an actual father or not? Probably most likely not, just kind of playing a role, but it kind of lends itself to, once again, there are people here who aren't who they claim to be, so. Then, because maybe I'm mistaken, wasn't there a dead body in that helicopter? So, was the father one of the people in the robbery? Or was he just kind of an outside person? Maybe he came up with the plan and stuff, and that the other two involved are, because there were 3 people involved in that robbery, 2 people and someone pretending to be the cop. But I swore there was a dead body in there, not unless that was the pilot or something that kind of got, maybe it was like technically a 4-person job because of the pilot plus the pilot, or maybe it was always just a 4-person job in general, and that person, like I said, maybe I missaw that, but I could have sworn it was a body in there, but maybe not. We'll know once they end up they'll have to drain the water, not fully drain it, but they know the helicopter's there, so it's just a matter of potentially getting it out. I don't know if they'd have the resources to do that unless the FBI helped out, so they'll probably have to have someone swim down there maybe and just check things out. So we'll have to wait and see how things kind of play out on that front as well, but some very interesting developments. I'm really excited to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.